Okay guys, this is a controversial topic and I might get a lot of dislikes, but tell me, what do you think about this? Or this? If you're an owner of a setup like this one with a mini PC or handheld, this video might disappoint you. Or if you're planning to get one for yourself, you'd better watch this video with attention. Because there's so much misinformation out there. This guy, for example, claims that Oculink doesn't affect performance in games, which is not true at all. And if he had watched my video where I compared performance, he would knew that. And he wouldn't show screenshots from synthetic benchmarks as proof if he knew how the bandwidth limit affect gaming performance. And in the end, he wouldn't have claimed that Mini PC can handle games at the same level as a desktop PC, showing a screenshot from a game where the RTX 4080 Super is utilized at 64%. Unfortunately for him, my GPU has nearly the same performance, but it's utilized at maximum, even at 1080p, which means there is a bottleneck and his GPU is chilling. But to an uninformed person, his arguments might sound pretty logical. So today, I wanna talk about expensive GPUs combined with mini PCs or handhelds. But to fully cover my point, do you remember where this all started? Mini PCs have become much more popular over the past few years. They used to be associated with the office solutions, perhaps a box for a software engineer or just for those who have limited space and the size of the device is important. But with the development of integrated graphics, it turned out that they are quite good with the games. And if 5 years ago they handled simple indie games, today they can handle AAA games. Companies has recognized this niche, and the more and more manufacturers are entering the market with models for completely different budget. And sometimes the price can easily reach $1000. Even considering that I have a small YouTube channel, just over the last year I've been approached by about 10 companies with an offer to make a review of their mini PC. The only ones I'm interested in were the Oculink model with a docking station for a video card, which I already have a review of, and a tiny PC from the last video. Anyway, in parallel with mini PCs, the handheld market is developing, offering about the same capabilities, but roughly speaking with a battery, screen and gamepad. Only the handheld market feels even better. The idea of a compact portable gaming PC has been sold, and for many, it becomes the only or primary device. But over time, for some people, their performance becomes insufficient, and they start looking for ways to improve it. The obvious solution is to plug an external GPU. And this is how the original idea of minimalism turns into a wired mess on the table. But that's not even the main problem. It's the fact that these mini PCs or handhelds have high-end GPUs connected to them via Oculink or Thunderbolt. And yes, if you look at my comparison videos, we don't seem to be losing that much. But I did the experiment on my desktop CPU, and it will be much more performant than a mobile CPU. And even though it may be obvious to most, trust me, many people will hear the phrase "on average will lose 10% of performance" and will not think about the CPU bottleneck. That's actually the reason why I decided to make this video. I thought that I could mislead people. And to show how much performance you can lose considering the bandwidth limit of the connection itself plus CPU bottleneck, I will show a comparison on the example of my handheld. Even though the built-in graphics of this handheld is not the most powerful, but the CPU is quite capable. So we will test it with Oculink connection, which is the best possible scenario. I wanted to add Thunderbolt connection for comparison, but Nvidia's 50 series GPUs refuse to work with it. I've explained more about it in this video. We will have the RTX 5070 Ti as our GPU, and for comparison purposes, it will be connected to a very average PC on a 9800 X3D with 64 gigs of RAM to squeeze out the maximum potential of our GPU. Graphics settings will be closer to real GPU usage. Max settings using DLSS on quality at QHD resolution. Let's start with my favorite game of recent years. And as you can see, the difference is far from sweet 10%. here we lose 50%. And if you look at the 1% low and the frame time graph, it's already obvious that it won't be so pleasant to play. The difference is also noticeable during combat. Just listen to the sound effects. And this is how it should be. And a side-by-side comparison. Another telling example is God of War. It was simply impossible to play on a handheld during shader compilation, while it was already playable on a desktop PC. The funny thing is that even during compilation, it shows better performance than the handheld after compilation. The frame time graph is crucial for any shooter game, and in case of Call of Duty, it was unstable. Not to mention that the average FPS was 46% lower, and the 1% low was 60% lower. But when the game is less CPU dependent, we can see excellent results. And the less load on the CPU, the less stress on the bandwidth limit of our Oculink connection. But as soon as we turn on ray tracing, which puts an additional load on the CPU, the difference in average FPS immediately reaches 40%. You can argue that I'm comparing it to a high-end CPU, but this idea for video has been in my head for a long time, and I did test even earlier, where I compared the most budget CPU, Intel i3-14100, with the same handheld, only back then I had RTX 4070 Super. And even then, despite its 4 cores, i3 shows similar or in some cases even better performance. Only in God of War, it took him some time to load the game with freezes, but then, even with 100% load, he was able to handle the game. It can also be argued that mini PCs will have more powerful CPUs than handhelds, since the TDP limit is higher. And I agree. Except that in my review of Belink's mini PC with i9-12900H, I compared its performance to a budget desktop PC build with i7-12700K. Their cost was roughly the same, and the performance there wasn't that far behind anymore. But it's worth considering that the GPU connection there had PCIe 8.4, which means that it had twice the bandwidth capacity of Oculink. But again, it was 4070 Super, which is more or less a mid-budget choice. If I had connected a more powerful GPU, the difference would be even more noticeable. Unfortunately, right now I don't have a mini PC with a high-end CPU for additional benchmarks, but I don't think that would change my message. What am I trying to say? That eGPUs are evil? No! Just don't romanticize the idea more than necessary. I personally gave up my PC for such an idea. I've used a handheld and when necessary, turned it into a performant PC. But it didn't last long because I had something to compare it to. It's not just the noticeable difference in FPS in games, it's the Windows load time, the speed of the browser while opening and reloading tabs, multitasking, noise, and so on. It's all just at a lower level compared to a desktop PC. And I don't want to say that you all live wrong, throw away your mini PCs and build a normal PC. No! Everyone has their own conditions, needs and reasons to buy whatever they want to. But those who buy a handheld or mini PC, eGPU dock and then high-end GPU for gaming, maybe it's better to rethink this idea. For example, build a PC in a small case if size is important. Modern graphics cards takes up much space anyway. And buying a mini PC, you are paying extra for compactness, which will later convert into a wired mess, while getting less performance. Overall, I'm not against the eGPU idea itself, and still use mine sometimes, but I have an RTX 2060 plugged in there, And if I wanted to upgrade it to something more performant, I would go for anything around the 4070 level at most. But in reality, if I need a better performance, I always use a desktop PC for that. If you disagree with me, you are welcome to the comments. Share your setup and tell us what makes it special. I am ready to discuss that. Who knows, maybe I missed some important points. And if you found the video useful, you can honor me with your like. Also, you can subscribe, and we'll wait together for the release of Thunderbolt 5 eGPU, which in my opinion won't change the situation much, but we'll see. Bye!